The contact appeared on my console at 0312 station time, and the first thing I noticed was that it had no entry number. Every contact has an entry number. The archive assigns one the moment a transponder pulse is detected. A 7-digit tag that links the vessel to its registry, its flag, its rated tonnage, its last filed flight plan. The number appears before the blip fully resolves. That is how it has worked for the 312 years since the Karath relay was commissioned. In all that time, across all the contacts I've logged and all the contacts my predecessors logged before me, the number has always come first. At 0312, the blip came first. The number never came at all. I ran the standard recalibration. A sensor ghost, most likely, reflection off the relay's own hull, or a stray particle cascade from the Sorvaan drift. The blip did not recalibrate away. It sharpened, and then the velocity reading resolved. And I sat very still in my chair for a moment before I called my supervisor. The contact was moving at 0.74 light fraction. A vessel of the mass the sensor suite was estimating, and it was estimating because the return was unlike anything in the calibration tables, more like a planet than a ship, more like a moving body of iron than a crude vehicle. A vessel of that mass could not move at 0.74 light fraction. The physics were not ambiguous on this point. The Sorvaan Directorate has 31 research stations and 4 dedicated academies, and every one of them will tell you the same thing. Past a certain mass threshold, the energy cost of acceleration becomes geometrically prohibitive. There are limits. The archive knows those limits. The archive has catalogued 14,000 spacefaring civilizations across 3,200 years of contact records, and not one of them has ever violated this particular ceiling. The contact was not in the archive. I mean that precisely, I queried by transponder. Result, I queried by silhouette profile. No result. I queried by velocity signature by spectral return. By the faint electromagnetic wash the contact was throwing off. A wash so broad it was fogging 3 adjacent sensor bands simultaneously, and every query came back the same. No result, no match, no classification, no species of origin. The archive's response was not unknown. The archive has an unknown category, a holding file for contacts that cannot yet be identified, but are presumed to exist. The archive's response, for the first time in my career, was the null return symbol. The category that means this entry does not exist. Supervisor Varath arrived at my console still pulling on his duty jacket. He looked at the screen for a long time. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the screen again. "Run the recalibration," he said. "I ran it 3 times, sir." He ran it himself. The blip sharpened further. 340. The relay's full sensor array was tasked to the contact. By 0355, we had a director-level alert on the channel. By 0410, the Directorate's 7th Intercept Wing, 62 ships, 8 of them rated line of battle, the remainder fast frigates and picket runners, had been scrambled from the Sorvaan anchor station 4 light hours spinward. This was protocol. The Directorate has very good protocol. 3,000 years of contact management, 14,000 catalogued civilizations, protocol has never failed to produce, within 8 hours of any unidentified contact, a classification, a flag, and a recommended diplomatic or interdiction posture. At 0412, the contact changed course. Not corrected course, not adjusted heading, changed. A hard vector shift, 22 degrees off its original bearing, executed at speed, with no deceleration phase before the turn and no visible energy expenditure during it. A vessel of that mass, at that velocity, turning that sharply, should have produced a Huakich vegetable for 3 systems away. The contact produced nothing. It simply was on one heading, and then it was on another. And the sensor suite registered the change the way it would register the movement of a thought. I noted the new heading in my log. The new heading put the contact on a direct intercept course with the 7th Wing. I want to be precise about what happened next, because I have read accounts of events like this. There are 16 archived incidents in the Directorate's history where an unclassified contact was engaged by interdiction forces. And in every one of those 16 incidents, the contact either fled, complied with hailing, or was neutralized. I had read all 16. I understood them to be a complete taxonomy of possible outcomes. I was wrong. At 0447, the 7th Wing's lead element, 12 frigates in standard picket spread, made visual contact with the vessel. First transmission back was from Commander Sorel Veth aboard the picket frigate. Careful assertion. I have the transcript. What she said was, "Lay, please confirm the scale reading on this contact." I am looking at it, and my instruments are telling me something that I do not think can be right. The scale reading was right. The vessel, I will call it what it was, because it was nothing else. The warship was long. I say this inadequately. Everything I am about to say about its size will be inadequate, because size is a thing the mind can abstract, and the sensor suite can measure, but the eye can apparently not accept, even at the remove of a camera relay. Commander Veth's visual feed showed the warship as a shape against the background star field. The shape was long, in the way that a scar is long, in the way that a geological feature is long, the kind of length that implies not construction but formation, as though the vessel had been assembled over centuries by the slow accretion of purpose. The hull was the color of old iron left in weather. It absorbed light. There was no engine glow, no running lights, no sensor ping reflection, nothing that indicated a ship in operation except for its movement, which was continuous and unhurried and absolute. It had markings on the forward quarter of the hull, in characters I did not recognize, laid into the metal itself, and it was suggested they had been there for a very long time. The archive had no match for the script. I have since shown the imagery to 4 separate xenolinguistics departments. None of them have a match either. The Seventh Wing's line of battle elements came up on targeting solutions at 0501. 8 ships, each carrying the Directorate's full interdiction armament. A suite designed, tested, and proven against every threat class in the archive's record. 8 ships against 1 vessel, and the commander of the Seventh Wing, Admiral David Sori, was a careful man. He hailed on all standard frequencies. He waited the required interval. He hailed again. He brought his line to full targeting posture, weapons hot, shields at military grade. The warship did not change course. It did not respond to the hail. It did not power any visible weapons system, not raise any detectable defensive field. Did not in any way indicate that it was aware of the 8 warships now arrayed across its path. L519, Admiral Sor ordered a single ranging all-shot, not an engagement volley, a ranging shot, a single pulse from one weapons platform, calibrated to impact the forward hull and produce a detectable contact flash without causing structural damage. A standard interdiction warning. The archive has 61 records of ranging shots being used as interdiction warnings. In 61 cases, the target responded. The pulse hit the warship's hull. I watched the sensor feed. I watched the impact register. I watched the readings that should have followed. Contact flash, material ablation, hull stress signature, and instead I watched the pulse simply stop, not deflect, not absorb, stop, in the way that a word stops when there is no one left to say it. The warship's hull returned nothing. The energy went in and did not come back out in any form the suite could detect. 61 entries in the archive. None of them contained this outcome. At 0521, the warship crossed through the center of the Seventh Wing's picket line. It did not fire. It did not maneuver to avoid contact. It passed between 2 of the frigates, at a distance that my sensor suite measured at 340 meters, and I still do not fully believe. Because 340 meters is the distance from my console to the relay's forward observation deck, and the idea of that warship passing through that gap between 2 ships without touching either of them is a thing I have had difficulty sleeping since. The frigate's hull sensors recorded the warship's passage as a pressure wave, a massive displacement of nothing, a shape that had been somewhere, and then was elsewhere, and left behind only the memory of its volume. The Seventh Wing reformed on the far side of its own picket line and came about for pursuit. The warship was already gone, not fled, gone. At 0522, 1 minute after passing through the Seventh Wing, the contact was 43 light seconds ahead of its previous position. At 0522 and 30 seconds, it was past the outer sensor range of the relay. At 0523, the console showed me the null return symbol again, and then showed me nothing, because there was nothing left to show. I sat in front of my screen for a long time after that. The Seventh Wing filed a full engagement report. Admiral Sorhi, to his credit, filed it accurately, with no softening of the facts, and no editorializing beyond what the facts themselves implied. report passed through 3 levels of directorate review before anyone was willing to forward it upward, because at each level the reviewing officer found something in it they needed to query. Query came back from the archive with the null return symbol, and eventually everyone who touched the report had the same experience I had at 0312 and was similarly unwilling to claim responsibility for what the document contained. The contact had no designation. The archive had no entry. The script on the hull had no translation. The hull material had no composition match. The energy absorption had no mechanism in any known physics model. The velocity at turn was not possible. The distance covered in the final minute was not possible. I filed my sensor log at 0600. I wrote my incident summary in the approved format, which has fields for vessel class, vessel flag, vessel registry number, and vessel last known heading. I left all 4 fields blank, because to fill them I would have needed an archive entry, and the archive had no entry, and I did not know how to explain to the form that some things exist outside the archive's categories. 3 weeks later, I received a request from the Directorate's Civilizational Survey Division, a department I had not previously interacted with, staffed by researchers who have spent their careers mapping the edges of known space. They wanted my sensor logs. They wanted the visual relay data. They wanted the spectral returns, and the hull script imagery, and the energy absorption readings and the velocity plot that should not have been possible. I sent everything. The researcher who contacted me, a senior analyst named Devitt Yorn, no relation, told me when I asked that they had been looking for something matching this description for some time. Not this specific vessel. The category. Evidence that somewhere in the space beyond the archive's reach, a civilization had been building things the archive did not know how to classify for longer than the archive had been keeping records. She said this without alarm. She said it as she might say that a species she had been studying had finally provided a data point she had been waiting for. I asked her what species built the vessel. She looked at her notes for a moment. Then she said, "The marker script on the hull. We've seen characters from that system before, on debris. Old debris from a sector we flagged about 60 years ago. The civilization the script belongs to doesn't have a formal archive entry. They were assessed as pre-interstellar about 4 centuries ago, and the survey team moved on." I thought about the hull, the age of it, the markings worn into the metal like something carved not by tools but by time. "How long ago?" I asked. "Did the survey team assess them as pre-interstellar?" She checked her notes again. "The original survey was 412 years ago," she said. "They had iron working. Primitive atmospheric flight. The assessment was that they were centuries from achieving orbit." I did not say anything for a moment. "The script on the hull," I said. "The characters, you've seen them in debris." "Old debris, yes. How old?" She was quiet on the other end of the channel. When she spoke again, her voice had the particular quality of a person who has recently had the experience of running a query and receiving the null return symbol. "Old enough," she said, "that we're not entirely sure how to account for the interval." I thanked her. I ended the call. I sat in front of my console, in the quiet of the relay at 0600 on a morning, when nothing was moving in my sensor range, and I thought about the shape of that hull against the star field, the length of it, the patience of it, the way it had passed through the picket line without acknowledgement, the way the energy had gone into the metal and not come back. The archive has 14,000 entries, 3,200 years of records. A null return symbol reserved in all that time, things the archive's designers considered theoretically impossible. I left all 4 fields blank in my incident form. I still think that was the right call.